Hello, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. Welcome to the Cluster Puck Podcast, part of the MHRT Network here at Center Ice. I'm Nick, and here shortly beside me is Brit. Got a lot to talk about, but also not too much to talk about. More just updates and things during this kind of dead time of the off season, where we're just getting so close to hockey actually coming back. Oh my gosh, I'm just counting down the days at this point. But we have a good chunk to talk about. We're gonna have a good episode today. But before we begin, don't forget everyone to like and subscribe. Follow the MHRT Network so you can get notified when shows like the Cluster Puck Podcast go live. You can follow them on the various social media platforms of your choosing. If you want to follow us, please do so. If you want to follow us on Facebook, you can find it at the Cluster Puck Podcast. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever they're calling it now, Threads, you can follow that at Cluster Puck Avs. Okay, so there was a couple things that we were going to discuss here, and the bulk of which I will wait until Brit gets here. So we'll kind of switch around the order of operations on how we're going to approach today's episode. So the first one is that the news is, at least what it's starting to sound like, is that Gabe Landeskog as well as Val Nichushkin are going to be ready to play near the start of the season. What the consensus is, it sounds like it's going to be kind of November-ish. I know that's kind of when Val Nichushkin's suspension wraps up from his violations for the NHLPA. And around November is kind of where he will already be back playing. So I think he's going to be kind of joining the team around the very, very start of November, kind of doing some revamp work, getting on the skates, practicing plays, all that kind of stuff. And then he'll probably be ready. It's interesting because it's still a very polarizing subject with Val Nichushkin. And obviously Brit and I have touched on it quite a bit. As far as kind of what happened, what needs to happen following, the incident going forward, that kind of stuff. But in all likeliness, it sounds like Val Nichushkin will be around to play the majority of the season. And I know there's a lot of people screaming about this, saying, we don't want that. It's not a good idea. He's already done this now twice to us, and every argument you have has merit. It makes sense. However, there are two things that do concern me outside of these extracurricular activities of his. The first one is going to be on salary cap. This one's going to be pretty tough because he's already a little over $6 million against the books, and the Avalanche don't have a lot of wiggle room as it is, right? Like they are, especially with these most recent acquisitions and stuff like that. They're, I think, inside that $6 million range. So they're going to have to figure out a way to, if they're going to bring him back, they're going to have to figure out a way to get creative with their cap space. Just because it's $6 million, and there are plenty of people that are in these $1 million and under, $2 million and under type deals where your depth is going to take a little bit of a beating because of it. It's not going to be anything fun per se. But on the other side of that, and this kind of brings me to my second reason, is your ability, your playmaking ability and team chemistry. That's, I guess, my other concern is when he comes back, he's going to have to really dig deep to earn the trust of his teammates again, because you think about it, this is now, like we've said before, the second time in as many postseasons that something extracurricular has happened with him, and it basically charred the team up to go and lose that series because mentally they just weren't in it. And a lot of people say, well, it's, that's something you just talk to your team and say, hey, he's not going to be here. We got to focus on what's ahead. Yes, that's true. And they probably did have those conversations. However, players know things, right? Like they're just like you and I. They're on, it's like 20 guys on a plane or a bus or whatever, and they're all on their phones, right? They all see the social media. They all see the news, right? They're just like us. In fact, I was watching a podcast with the Bar Down guys and Sean Dursey when it came to his the relocations from the Coyotes in Arizona to Utah, kind of what was going on there. And it started a 14-game skid. And he even mentioned that in that, as soon as those rumors began to pop up, they had a team meeting immediately the same day. And they said those exact same things, like, we're not going to let it get into us mentally. You know, we're going to focus on what's ahead. We're going to dish those aside, stuff like that. But ultimately, I mean, people think about things, right? Their brains, they're just like, well, what about this? What about that? Even during gameplay, right? So to me, back with the Avalanche, it's that same kind of thing where, yeah, I'm sure they've talked about it and said, hey, we're not going to let this affect us. But even so, they begin to think, oh man, I wish Val was here right now, or hey, Val would have made this shot, or he would have been able to tuck this defender this way, or whatever it is. And you kind of lose confidence effectively in not only Val, but on the team as a whole. It's pretty difficult, the situation that they're in, because you had someone that you thought it's like, oh, he made a slip up, we'll get him next time, but then he does it again to a deeper offense. So team chemistry is going to be a bit rocky. I think it's going to be really difficult to trust him, but he is such a good player that maybe they fall into that trust category quicker. Maybe, I'm not entirely sure. But at the same time, you're going to have to look at it and say, well, he is a good player. And that's the hard part about this whole thing, is because he was one of your best players. I think he was your fourth guy behind. No, he might have even been your third guy behind Rantanen and McKinnon. Kel McCarr might have been a little bit ahead of him overall, probably. But as far as points production, I think it would have been Val somewhere up in that third area, despite missing a chunk of the season. So it's kind of, what's more important to you at this point, right? Because if you're focused too much on like, oh, he's back, I can't believe we brought him back, this kind of stuff, and you're dwelling in the fact that team didn't get rid of him, what's he doing, all this kind of stuff. Or you have the mentality of, he's back, he's good, we're going to be better, let's move on from this and let time kind of heal these wounds, so to speak. It's kind of what happened the first time. It's going to have to be what happens the second time, assuming he's back mid-November-ish, right? So that's with Val. It's a tough situation. It's not fun to talk about, but it does need to be spoken. That sounds like it's going to be the reality of things, unless something drastic changes. It sounds like it's going to be Val Nichushkin back sometime November, mid-ish November is what I'm hearing. The next one, this one's a much more fun side of things, and that's Gabe Landeskog. He was even at a golf tournament just yesterday, a couple days ago, time this recording, and he said that his leg has felt great. He's excited. Jared Bednar even commented that he should be ready to go near the beginning of the season. Now, near is relative term depending on who you ask, but near to me could mean end of October, right? End of October, beginning of November type things, where you introduce him to those team practices again and you just monitor it. So most times, it takes the guy, as soon as they get back off of the LTIR, about a week or so to gel and stuff like that. And then they're back, 4 or 5 games later from the time they're off the LTIR-ish, right? With Landeskog, though, this one is going to be one where I'm like, you need to approach this thing with extreme caution, because, again, one little setback, and we go all the way back to square one, and effectively, I think it's a career killer. So he, in videos that Brendan Vaught was doing, Evan Rowell was also doing, which we'll talk about one of his articles here in a little bit. They showed videos of Landeskog doing skates there in Denver, and he was putting plenty of weight on the knee, plenty of turning and stuff like that, making C cuts just great. And it looks like he's back to his kind of normal fighting shape. So near the start of the season is kind of what we're hearing, which is exciting news, because honestly, being 2 years without a captain, having him on the sidelines, but not on the ice. I mean, say what you want, having a captain is a really big deal, right? And you even saw kind of with what we mentioned last week of Austin Matthews getting the captaincy and stuff like that. It's a big thing, especially in the game of hockey, right? A team captain is kind of that force that drives this whole thing, keeps the team confident, because he's always positive, encouraging, headstrong, that kind of stuff. And when you're without that as a hockey team, it doesn't feel like you necessarily have no sense of direction, but you don't have that vocal piece, right? You don't have that leading edge of your team to go out there and go to bat for, go and fight someone. If you took a nasty check, that captain Gabe is always there to fight, right? I mean, I always think about the Shen Landeskog incident against St. Louis, where one of the Avs, took a really nasty hit. Landeskog took all offense to that, and he went and just beat the living crap out of Shen. Like, it was one of the most amazing things you would ever see. And if you haven't seen it, go watch the Connor McGahey call, the radio call of that one. And it's gold, man. It really is one of my favorite calls that Connor McGahey has ever done. So it's going to be good to get him back, getting a captain back on the ice, having some kind of a mold glue coming togetherness type thing. Obviously, I don't think he'll be thrown right onto the first pairing or excuse me, first line. I think they usher him into the fourth. There are pros and cons with that, though, I think. Pros being you are going to be the best one out on the ice, most likely, right? Which means that the people around you are not going to be nearly as talented. But that also comes with it a potential of recklessness, right? Because a lot of people know you don't go after your Austin Matthews and Connor McDavids and Nathan McKinnons of the league because they're the names, right? It's kind of one of those common understandings. You don't go after them unless you have like a death wish, basically, where you have the whole team coming after you in revenge. But Landeskog being on that fourth line and recovering, it is also in kind of hockey nature, at least from what I've understood, to kind of exploit injuries, so to speak. If they notice you're skating a little gingerly, they'll kind of nudge that side a little more than the other. And being on the fourth line, you are less controlled, so to speak. Obviously, your talent isn't as high as the first line and second line and stuff like that. So that's kind of where my worry. And I could be completely wrong about this, right? But just from what I've seen, there is that recklessness of the fourth line because of that inability to have the skill and finesse and stuff like that as the first line. So putting him on a fourth line, yes, he'll be able to go and get around and stuff like that, but there also comes to it a potential price because these fourth liners might not be as careful around Landeskog as maybe these first liners who show some respect to the veteran, right? Potentially. Right, that's just my thoughts. And obviously, if you disagree, if you have other thoughts or wanted to add to it, obviously go ahead and throw stuff in the comments. But that's just kind of what I'm fearing. Is it rational? I think so. Right. I mean, it's always the possibility of the stronger possibility. But nonetheless, he's coming back, and it's honestly going to be a really big breath of fresh air when he does, because we've been captainless, and it's not been fun. It's been having my Landeskog jersey in the closet has not been fun. So I'm going to bust that out as soon as he comes back for his first game back. So as far as finance, though, we talked a little bit about Nichushkin. Landeskog's is even bigger. Same type of deal, though. How are you going to maneuver these pieces around when Landeskog comes back onto the books? I think he's a 7 or 8 million, I think. What are you going to do? Right? There's going to be a price to pay, let alone if they both are now back by by Thanksgiving, they're both back. That's like 15 million right there, right? That's 15 million you do not have. So you really are going to have to figure out what you're doing in order to make that work. I'm sure they'll figure it out. I'm not exactly the numbers guy. And there could be some pieces that I'm missing that might allow it to be a little easier, but we'll just have to see. So exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. We're going to at least have these two playing at some point. At least I would say expect these two to play at some point earlier in the season. And all signs point to Landeskog jumping in earlier than Nichushkin. So we're extremely happy to have them both, despite kind of off-ice incidents and stuff that have happened like that. Okay, moving on then. So the bulk of this episode and kind of the title of this episode has to do with some away from the Avalanche activity that's been happening over in Nashville. And the main thing that's been kind of going on there is with a goalie named Askarov, whose name all of a sudden eludes me for some reason. In fact, oh gosh, that's really going to bother me. It is Yaroslav. Yep, Yaroslav Askarov, who is this up-and-coming goalie that he shows a lot of promise in the NHL, right? And he's been highly touted as one of the best prospect goalies that could make that jump and do well, kind of the new Fedotov of the NHL. And Evan Rowell, speaking of Evan that we mentioned previously, he wrote an article on the Colorado Hockey Now website where he publishes his work, saying why the Avalanche should be kind of asking about Askarov. And it got me to think, is this necessary? Is this something that we need to do? Is it something that's worth looking into? And there's a couple of pros and cons with that, right? The first, well, I guess let's put pros and cons in a bucket first, set it to the side. Let's focus on the first question is, do we need to even look at Askarov? Do we need to kick the tires on him? Do we need to go and search, see if there's a possibility of him coming back? What's the deal, first of all, when it comes to the Avalanche needing a new goalie? Now, keep in mind, Askarov, his numbers when he was playing in the AHL didn't just jump off the charts, right? They weren't like outrageously good. He's way too good for the AHL, that kind of stuff. They were solid. They were good, but they weren't like he's miles, leaps and bounds beyond the rest. It's just that he shows that type of talent where he can flourish probably a little better than most in that same top tier category from the AHL to the NHL. He can make that jump and do just fine. In fact, he'd do very well, is what the general consensus is. Now it comes to the question of, well, you just signed Justus Annunen as your bona fide backup for the season, with Alexander Georgiev spearheading the tandem, right? So it goes to, well, what do you do with him? Because the thing is with Askarov, the whole reason why he's requested a trade and stuff like that is because he wants NHL playing time, and he's been very adamant about that. So he requested a trade out of Nashville to a place where he would get minutes, starting minutes with an NHL team. So are the Avalanche a fit for that type of a deal? Well, yes and no. And the only way I can explain that is, yes, he could get time with the Avalanche, but he would most likely start with the Colorado Eagles and try to then outshine, so to speak, Justus Annunen, and just hope that Annunen is now less bright of a star than he was last season, right? Maybe he kind of flubs up a couple. It's just not working out. There's a few things to take a look at, right? A few things that he needs to have happen, not necessarily cheering against your teammate, so to speak, but just being able to outshine, right? Which is going to be tough considering they just gave Annunen this contract, right? So it's possible anywhere he goes, really. It's possible, but he needs to prove that he can do this, especially with a cup contending team. Now, if he's going to a lesser team, say with like the Ducks, where he could back up Gibson, no problem, or, things like that, where there's a little bit more where he can kind of flex his muscles a little bit more, then yeah, I think there's that trade that can happen there, and he could kind of get put onto the backup role, no problem, right? But ultimately, if the Avalanche do trade for him, he's gonna just kinda, I think, stick in the AHL, kind of being, Ivan Prosvetov's replacement. Because if you remember just a couple weeks ago, Russia went and plucked off Ivan Prosvetov and brought him to the KHL. So you are kind of, I don't wanna say goalieless, you'll always have goalies, right? But the AHL is going to need someone to be that goalie for him, right? And that would be Askarov's kind of main task, is to make sure that the Eagles are set up good and they're flourishing before he can then make that transition. I don't think that's something that Askarov really wants to do. I think it's something that he's like, I want playing time now. So my final answer to, is it even worth bringing up, kicking the tires, honestly, I don't think so, right? I mean, it would, obviously, just to see if he'd be willing to, but it doesn't sound like he would be. So I would just say it's best not to go after him, right? Um, oh, just a second. Britt was texting. Just give me 2 seconds here. She needs a code to get in. Let's get that for her real fast. All right. I will send her the code once it gets to the email. Okay. Um, so it looks like Allie has a comment here and says, I honestly don't know how many teams in the league are at that point that they could give him the playing time he wants. I tend to agree. I think there are too many that kind of already have this tandem already set up, and especially this close to the beginning of the season, where training camp is probably like what, about a month away. I know, well, preseason's actually a month away, so training camp is probably little less than that, probably 4 weeks or so. um, there's not a lot of teams that are going to give him this type of an opportunity. The best chance right now that I think that Askarov has is to either have one of those bottom feeding teams that they're still in a rebuild, someone like a San Jose, like even maybe a Chicago, but it would be in a backup role, even, right? Until he can then prove and outshine the rest of the people, right? So yes, Sally, I would agree with you on that. Just because everybody else has enough and a decent amount of goaltending to continue. Like, it's not necessary, I should say, for them. Okay, here we go. Let me get that code for Brit here. Okay, there we go. So she should be hopping in here in just a few minutes. So there are those few teams, right? And Ali, exactly what we were talking about. San Jose, a Columbus, being that 1A, 1B tandem with either Mrazek in Chicago or Merzlikins in Columbus, right? So it's a possibility, right? But it's a high asking price because he hasn't shown off a ton. The times he has, he's been very good, I will say, right? Like, I'm not saying he's a terrible goaltender, but he's asking quite a bit for not showing enough for what he's asking, is all I'm saying, right? So we'll just have to wait and see, right? To see kind of what pans out, who ends up taking the bait, right? Because I don't think he's going to want to play for Nashville, considering they just signed Saros. And ultimately, for as far as the Avalanche are concerned, I say you don't really need to stick to that, right? Um, Ali also does say here that she feels like it would be a better trade deadline grab. I'd be interested, Ali, to get your thoughts on what do you mean by that, because I'm assuming you're thinking if he stays in the AHL with Nashville's team, somebody goes and grabs him, and maybe by then he's kind of lowered his expectations as far as trade is concerned. I'm curious what you mean by that. So I'll wait for your other comment to show up. But yeah, as far as goaltending is concerned, I think the Avalanche are just going to move with what they've had. They've had Alexander Georgiev, who's been fine. He's been fine. Like, it's everyone wants to pin the blame on Georgiev for a lot of these games that we lost over the last couple of seasons, and there's a lot of times where they can make that argument, right? However, it's it's a little different because Georgiev had too much playing time, I think, at the end of the day, where he just needed a break. And with this now, with Annunen being signed, that's going to be able to give him that much of a rest, so to speak. So I think the Avalanche are just going to stick with what they've been doing, and kind of that's that, right? Okay, so before we go on to the next one, I believe Brit is here. Let's see if we can get her in here, and we'll ask her about Yaroslav Askarov and what she thinks. Let's see. Okay, Britt, I'm going to bring you in. You ready?
Oh my God. I was ready 20 minutes ago.
We got it.
Me. That was weird. I'm on a new computer and just had to use every passway to get in here and still only ended up being a guest. So sorry about that.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Okay, Britt. So here's what we were just talking about was Yaroslav Askarov with the whole Nashville Predators situation. The question is, do the Avalanche inquire? Do they need to? If they do, what's going to happen?
I've been going round and round with this. If we do, it's definitely going to be the biggest goalie bet that we've made in a long time, and it's going to be a big goalie bet, which is not our thing. Like because what would have to happen is that we would have to intend to keep him essentially until Miskarov, like all these Russians, Miskarov, is that what it is?
I believe so, yes.
Who is our goalie that we drafted in this draft? We'd pretty much have to anticipate keeping Askarov until we would have him, in waiting. And it feels like we would have to. I mean, would you anticipate they would trade on and in with that? Because he's still considered a prospect. I don't know that he has the ceiling that we anticipate from Askarov, but they would expect something in return.
There is that potential, and that was, I guess that's another good point that I never brought up was would Annunen be part of that trade? I think with you just signing him and now giving him this shot to be that kind of 1B goalie, I don't think he's going to be part of a trade equation, right? So I would have to think you'd have to trade a bunch of prospects, and
he kind of screwed them because they don't have a lot of leverage because everybody knows that he wants to leave, and that's always a problem. It weakens your value a lot, which doesn't mean anything to him, but it limits what people are willing to offer for him.
And so that's the next question then, Britt, is do you think with what he's asking to do, because obviously he wants NHL playing minutes.
Yeah, he basically said he will not play in the AHL and refused to report to the AHL team, which
pretty much
kind of get it. It was kind of a slap in the face for them to re-sign Soros, for as long as
it really was. And so my question then is, do you think he has shown himself to be of value to be an NHLer now?
And this is my primary issue is the sample size. I honestly do believe that he does have a high ceiling, but I don't know if they're going to buy into that sample size being enough, especially in this day and age where goalies can play out of this world for a year. And look at Jordan Binnington.
Yeah.
You fall off the face of the earth.
Yep. I think you're exactly right. And that's exactly what I was saying is the times he's played, he's been good. Like that's not the argument. It's just you've shown in those few games that you can do it,
and
but can you sustain?
We're not desperate. I'm sorry, but Georgiev is not a worthless goaltender. We only have him for 2 more years. 1 year after this one, correct? We have things in line for Onanen to take over should he continue, on the trajectory that we anticipate him to. And clearly, I just don't know that they're going to be willing to sacrifice Onanen, like in a trade because there's really nothing to do with him. Should we take Askarov? They have invested so much effort and patience into developing Onanen, taking sorry, my dog will not get out of my feet. Taking basically every precaution necessary, not throwing him in too early and ruining his confidence, giving him time off for injuries. It would be wild to think that they would be ready to blow that off now, just when he's at the cusp of becoming an NHL goaltender.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's exactly right. I think with what you just did, if you're the Avalanche, you don't just 180 it and say, well, never mind, right? Because you have developed on it for so long. You've
Right.
had Georgiev, who's played well for you for so long.
And for the love of God, it would be so nice to see a goalie that we drafted actually play some NHL.
Actually played for the Avalanche, exactly. I 100% agree with that. So ultimately, my answer was I don't think you need to go headhunting for.
No, we have a lot bigger
Yaroslav Askarov.
problems. I feel like
we got cap stuff because if with Nichushkin being ready mid-ish November from what we were hearing, and then Landeskog being ready, they said close to the start of the season, you're already going to be in cap trouble if those two come back on the books.
Yep.
So, like I said, I don't think it's time that we focus on.
I'm in a different room, by the way, because I got my new computer, but I couldn't get it on StreamYard, so I didn't turn my fan off. So that's why things are blowing around, and I'm on my phone, and it's just blinking up and down here if you can't see it.
No,
so sorry
if
I'm giving anyone like seasickness, because
super vertigo. That's all. No, you're good. Okay, so we'll kind of move on to the last topic, but it's kind of a larger topic, which was kind of another point that we wanted to make.
With the only topic that is
it's
all consuming. Essentially, everything revolves around it at this point. So
that's right. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was who we think the top 5 point scorers are going to be for the Avalanche.
Did you already go over Nik and Gabe?
I did. I'm more than happy to revisit that though for you to put your opinion.
No, did you go over the release today that they discussed? Where like I didn't get to hear you. I was too busy pounding.
I know you're good. So from what I was told,
or have you read that?
I did not from potentially that article, just from a couple from a day or two ago.
I think it was a Bednar interview that they took from. But
with
basically,
Landeskog?
Yeah, where he had his monumental quote, of course. It's not if, it's when he returns, of course. Yeah. I think all of that was really reassuring. Just throwing my 2 cents out there. Nuke has got it sounds like he's going to be accepted. Did you listen to Jesse Montano talk about, he said that the quiet discussion within like the beat writers and that they can, they get stuff that they can't talk about super openly, but basically that they're going to welcome Nuke back, but it is expected that he's going to have to humble himself and
he's own it. Be on a tight leash.
Yeah, the own it thing is troublesome for me because I haven't seen a single sliver of that, but I mean, it's nice to know that they're already to the point. And they also said today that McKinnon is calling him at least twice a week and checking on him. So,
well, that's good.
McKinnon's not like, hey, bestie, what kind of support? I don't think he's the best emotional supporter. So for him to be making such like a big effort signifies that the team as a whole is probably prepared to bring him back and accept him as long as he stays on track.
Yep, and that's kind of what I was talking about. Kind of the start of this episode was with regarding Nichushkin is it's going to be a lot tougher to earn that trust back right now, and
it's like going to be a rough road because whatever it is that he is struggling with addiction with. I was kind of thinking the other day, I really hope that's not what propelled him to the greatness that we've seen as of late. And it kind of made me wonder that we haven't heard more discussion of that from the NHL, accusing the Avs of getting their cup off the backs of someone utilizing performance enhancing. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if he can still perform without whatever has been.
Potentially. And I put my tinfoil hat on. I think he stopped using those as soon as he got better. But it wasn't necessarily he was using them for performance enhancement more than it was for that relaxing feel.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think so? Because I always thought it was and I don't know if it's wrong to speculate, but I always assumed it was like the party drug, the party, which
it could be.
I don't know how. I haven't done enough of that in my life or any of it to know if that would only have such a short-term effect on performance athletically, that it would end up becoming a problem quickly. So I don't know. And I do know that he had doping problems while he was in the Russian league prior to coming to the NHL. So, and it's not our entitlement to know, but God, it sure would like stop a lot of questions,
Yes,
you know.
just give us something, man. Like
Yeah,
just something to at least put the mind at ease. But
it
yeah,
would
so
help. But I mean, and it's not our business, but you know, we are allowed to care and speculate. We spend a lot of money and put a lot of emotional investment into it. So I'm ready to be past this chapter. I'm so sick and tired of talking about it. And
yeah,
I just, he needs to just put his head down, own it, and just show up next year and kick ass.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's all he can do. Because if he's not, if he has any more slip ups, he is done. Like
He's done.
done. So yeah,
Yep.
sorry. Okay,
Nope.
so the top 5 scorers on the
Yeah.
apps.
So who do we think now going into this season, knowing who's coming back, knowing everything with so assuming Landeskog and Chushkin are back, who do we think are going to be the top 5 point scorers this season? I'm pretty sure 3 of which we're going to agree on. I'm curious more than anything about the other 2.
Okay.
So I think it goes without saying, and I'm 99.9% confident that we're going to say Nathan MacKinnon is going to be your top point scorer.
And if we don't, then this podcast will look a lot different at the end of the year.
Yeah, we're going to be rewatching this episode going, yeah, we definitely said the confidence thing, didn't we? But
figuring out if I can rename my child.
That's right. But coming off a Hart Trophy winning season, you just broke a long-standing franchise record. That's including Nordique's history, right?
That stretched through eras of much more far poorer goaltending. There was the dead puck era, but goals were not. They did not have to be so pristine to score. I mean, it was so much easier to get a sloppy goal once in a while, but not anymore. I mean, it's a different game, and so him doing it now is incredible.
I would agree, and especially when you're up against names like Stastny, Goulet, Sakic, you know, it's like that's elite company, and so for him to break that record, then win the Hart Trophy all in the process, I don't see any reason he couldn't do the same thing this season because he made it look effortless.
Well, and here's my justification is I don't think that last year was an anomaly for MacKinnon.
No.
I think it was just a testament to what he can do when he actually has a full season. Because what did he play last year? I think did he hit 80? I think it's the closest that he's been to every game in several years. It feels like he's had at least 1 or 2 stretches of 5 to 7 games. And that's the difference between being able to hit those milestones and maintaining momentum. I really don't think that it was really that his play was all that more special. But I just think that it's the consistency. And I genuinely, wholeheartedly, in all my cheesy, stupid opinions, believe that being out there on the ice with Jonathan Drouin was the little boost that he needed in like, I mean, the year after the cup year was just, I was like looking at my memories and I had posted yesterday, I had one, no, it must have been in like mid-December, and it was like starting lineup for the Colorado Avalanche is like Nathan MacKinnon, the pylon that we found in the locker room, and the Zamboni driver. We were so hurt. I mean, all we could do was
we were in a
every
bad
time
place, man.
there was an Avs release, it was like, oh God, who's hurt? Like that's all. It was all consuming on that team.
I remember that.
Yeah, and then the nuke thing. I mean, we should have been able to enjoy that year just a little bit as the reigning Stanley Cup champions, but all we got to hear is how this team beat the reigning Stanley Cup champions, and it's like this wasn't the same
team.
Like, yeah,
this was not even close.
Team is not who that
You're
was.
the AHL equivalent. Like, come on.
Yeah, we had our goaltend. We used every goaltender we could, and that was starting out with a upper.
We called up every prospect we could too.
Yep, we were. We had like Logan O'Connor playing on the first line for a while, which that might happen this year. Who knows?
Wasn't a bad idea.
I'm not opposed to it anymore, but I mean, it was wow.
Yeah.
And it ultimately ruined Sampo Ranta's NHL career, so I hate it even more. But it just, I really think that some consistency and just some stability and health for this team just proves that we are what we are. It's just that we haven't been able to be the team that we are. You know what I mean? I'm just rambling, but
no, you're totally
I
right.
feel a lot of excitement. This is the most excitement that I've had for like New Hope since prior to the cup run. Like it just feels like there's no, I mean, short of Nuke and Gabe, but I've pretty much convinced myself they're both coming back. They'll both be back. I think that Nuke we can anticipate by the end of November because he is playing in the KHL, so he is staying game ready. Gabe, I just don't want
Beginning
them
of
to hurry
November?
him because the way I see it now, we are to that Tampa status where it's like nobody gives a shit what we're doing in the regular season. We just make the playoffs, and we just need Gabe back for the playoffs.
That's all we
Some time
need.
to run after. Even if we waited until Christmas, I wouldn't anticipate him till at least Thanksgiving. But if we wait till Christmas, I don't see any reason to rush it at this point. We win the playoffs are what matter. Other than that, we just need enough points to get in. And that's you know how that's kind of Tampa thing is they would super suck for a while and people like,
just
yeah, but
straight by, and then once it's playoff time, you hit a different tier. Yep.
Yeah.
I 100%
Sorry, that was a long tangent. I have been talking and watching and playing and coaching so much hockey this week. My brain is about to explode. But I have like no reservations in assuming, I'll say it and we can come back and make fun of me at the end of the year. But
there you go.
If Nathan McKinnon plays at least like 75 games, I don't see any reason that he won't hit that marker again, especially when you consider the people that we're adding back in.
I think you're exactly right. And for reference, he played all 82 games.
Did he? Wow.
Played all
good
82.
Guy. That's crazy.
So yeah, especially with Duran helping him, I think you're exactly right. I mean, that did bring out the best in him, literally.
Well, and our roster is shored up so much better that we shouldn't have to overplay these guys. Like I said in the last podcast, it's going to be less injuries when they're not playing exhausted.
Exactly. I think you're exactly right. Okay, so after Nathan McKinnon, then Brit, I have Mikko Rantanen being your second most points scored.
Because bro's trying to get his bag.
It is a contract season for him. I'm not going to say necessarily he's like a distant second. He'll be like, if Nathan McKinnon takes a step back, I think Rantanen takes that step up and has the potential to outscore points-wise Nathan McKinnon, but I will still say
there's a good chance he's going to be manning his own line for a lot of the season. I really am buying into, I would like to keep them separated, at least until we have a grasp on lines.
After Nichushkin and Landeskog?
Yeah. And if we know that Mikko likes anything, he likes his money, because the only time I've ever seen him act out beyond like an idiotic 2-minute stint on the ice was when he held out through training.
The last contract that he was
So we know he's willing to work for it, which I think is good now. And it sounds like they're really, really, really close to wrapping up that contract.
Which is, that's good to hear.
Yeah. We don't need to let him get through this contract year. Like, even if we do it halfway through, it'll be dangerous if we let him go out there and score 150 points himself. And then
no kidding. No kidding. So after Mikko, then, so top two, I think we're both in agreement.
I don't know.
Third.
Let me see here who your next one is.
So I have Cale Makar being your third, just
He's
because
due for a
after McKinnon and Rantanen, Cale Makar will come close, I think, to 100 points. But he might be just short, maybe like lower 90s is going to be my guess. Because if you think about it, he had an off year, still had 82 points.
Yeah, right? And I think he is going to have the bounce back of a century.
And I think you're right.
And I don't know if you agree, but I feel like him as a human is someone who is probably a lot more receptive or affected by the problems in the locker room and like the
Sure.
disarray. I think he's a lot more of an emotional human. So I think that if we see this year be smoother, I think it'll be better for his mental health. And we got a loaded defense. So
Yeah.
he can play normal superhuman NHL minutes as opposed to ridiculously high superhuman NHL minutes.
To a point where it stresses you. I agree.
But yeah, I think this is the year of Cale Makar. I mean, if you told me that he ended up being the highest points on the team,
it wouldn't surprise me.
I can't put any limits on him. And I'm really excited to watch him be him again because he was so magical. And it just felt like last year he was hurting and just nothing felt right. So
yep. I think that's exactly right. And he is an emotional guy. If you didn't see his wedding videos, boy, he was
the world does not deserve
he was
that
a
man.
different human being at his wedding. If you guys don't know,
I'd like
he got
to know
married
if like
over the weekend.
alcohol was involved. Do you suppose? I could just see him like only drinking
I would assume alcohol was heavily involved because Cale Makar normally does his demeanor is not like that because he was like singing karaoke and this and all that stuff. But when it comes to like
cookies.
What?
So Mac had camp today, and Jake Pritchard is running it. He's the coach for the Musketeers. Yeah, and so I asked if I could go out there with him for the camp, and I've been shagging for him, but I've just been trying to listen to him because Jake is an absolutely incredible teacher of skating, like edge work and the fundamentals and all the niche details. But he played on a line with Cale Makar in the championship in the year that they.
Oh, she might have pressed the wrong button. Oh boy, we'll get her back in here in just a second. But I guess I don't really know exactly where she was going with it, so I will go on with my fourth and fifth. Oh, just kidding. She's hopping back in. Here we go. Hey.
It kicked me in so that it could let me know that we can get cash back on StreamYard from Rakuten. So
that's why it kicked you out, huh?
I was just sick of listening to me gush. My phone's been in my pocket, and Jake played with Makar, which he's the one that I told you. I said, okay, so what about Taylor? And Taylor said that, or excuse me, Jake said that Taylor is like close to being like as athletically talented, not quite the IQ, but he's, I guess, bigger than Cale Makar and apparently just a wonderful, amazing superhuman. I'm never going to let go of the thought that Taylor Makar might actually play with us. But like I was saying, Jake, I don't even remember where I was going with this. I just can't stop. Oh, I can't stop talking about Cale Makar. I bet that he is so ready to shoot me because I love asking him and talking to him about edge work and Cale Makar. But it's just like, I honestly think Cale Makar is the greatest human that ever lived. So hockey and the world, like
just outside of
it. He's a perfect person. And he said that he really is a good person like that, off the ice. And
I believe it.
He's probably going home and just being like, Cale, don't ever open any emails that you get or any fan mail from Brit because she's crazy.
That's exactly right. Okay, so there's the top three, which I figured is about as much as what we were going to.
So, okay,
have.
let me tell you mine. I had a difference in my top three. So.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, before you throw yours in there, I want to see. I had Drouin. I struggled with Drouin between second and third. So I had Mikko and Drouin. Mikko, Drouin. Yeah, they're my toss-up. And then Cale after that. I think they'll all be close, but do you think that I just like, and maybe I'm just trying to manifest it. Still manifesting my Crosby stuff too. Like it doesn't necessarily work for me.
You keep on doing that, Brit.
Yeah,
you just keep on doing
that. With the Drouin staying and clearly having like a team friendly handshake deal, like very amicable coming together. He made a sacrifice to stay here because what if he doesn't have a good year this year, then he's not going to be able to make the bank that he could have last year. But I think that he is I just feel like he has to be so revived. And now he's coming in with a full training camp confidence. I think he could come out and, I mean, he was a third overall? Was it third?
Oh, gosh.
That doesn't happen on accident. And it's not like he's injury prone. He's had a very, very light NHL career as far as, wear and tear. I feel like he could come out this year and like shock the world, like lead the
Yeah,
league in scoring. It's in there. He's not old. He's not hurt. He's not, you know what I mean?
sure.
I'm not guaranteeing it's going to happen, but I think it could. The chance of it happening is greater than 0.
Yeah, and it would not surprise me to see him reach into that top 3, considering that mental block he has now kind of removed, playing with Nathan
And
MacKinnon on that
yeah,
top
like we said
line.
last week, we saw it. We literally could see the physical like breaking through
Yeah,
as he
yeah.
made different plays, played like a different person. So then combine that with the locker room as a whole and the team as a whole being healthier or more mentally squared away. I mean, I can't guarantee it, but there is a chance that he could go compete for like the Hart type stuff.
Sure, understood. So as far as Jonathan Drouin is concerned, I have him at my number 4. Just because I liked where he was last year, and I think he does take that next nudge up. I have a tougher time thinking he would beat someone like Cale Makar or Mikko, especially on the contract year. Wouldn't surprise me, right? If it did, if he just all of a sudden blew even more up, because now he has unlocked that capability. I think you're absolutely right. But to me, that's a tough mountain to climb, because that's a 3-headed monster that has constantly produced high numbers.
His like point production may be a lot more dependent on Gabe and Nuke, because he's gonna move up and down the lineup a lot more than Mac, Mikko. Because I mean, Drouin is one of those guys that we could truly have to throw on the third or wing or center. I mean, so
100%.
he may be put in the shuffle and still be just as valuable regardless of point production, but it also, the stars could align where he just scores a shitload of goals, because
exactly. Yep, I think that's exactly right. Okay, so who then do you have at your number 4?
Like, what if I said that it's just what I want? So I'm gonna say it.
You can say what you can go ahead and go that way.
Okay, so I've struggled with what I want versus what signals the best for the team in the future. So I kind of settled on, I'm perfectly content with Middlestat or Ross Colton. And I think that Middlestat has more of the unknown for what he can do when all the stars align. Ross Colton doesn't have the highest ceiling, but the guy likes to score, man. So I don't, and especially if he's gonna be with his boys again, the gang's back together. But either one of those having a really, really good year would be really good for us, especially when you consider Middlestat. We've got him locked in, and it's not easy to find another 2C. So I would like him to, and I think he's capable of it.
Yeah, I think that logic is sound. I mean, it's with a full season, considering we acquired Middlestat, he was the leading scorer for the Sabres when we got him, right?
It still blows
that's
my
huge.
mind that they traded him. It's hard to think
what
comparable would have been when we were in our dark days. I mean, is it much different than if we had traded MacKinnon when he sucked, but was still when we sucked and he was in?
I think it would have been similar to like us trading Ryan O'Reilly for someone like a Victor Hedman.
I just don't know if I would have been that happy about it in Ottawa with how unknown Bo is. And I guess we're so ultra sensitive and in tune to the situation. We've been following every time the guy has like walked fast even for the last few years. So I guess it's not as big of a deal to everyone else, or they're not as worried about it. But man, I hope he makes them regret it. I want not regret it, but miss him, because I want Bo to do well also.
Oh yeah, but I mean, you look at the Islanders with Devon Taves. They still have said that now 5 years, 4 years later, they're still saying stuff about that trade. So I'm sure it'll happen. I am more than sure actually that it'll happen. But yeah, definitely an interesting take. I think it's time he now has that season of the Avalanche where he starts with them, shows what he's capable of, and with the team or a line that he's with, he's going to show that he's more than capable, right? So I think you're
well,
exactly right.
and he's going to be presented with an opportunity to really take charge. I mean, this is a good time where people prove themselves, you know, in a way that establishes them. There's people that have had seasons like this come up for them and they have one good year and they ride for the rest of their NHL career and get overpaid
100%.
and people work way too hard to keep them and have them for the next 10 years. Not that that's him, but again, Binnington, like you can ride that for a long time.
Yeah. I'm also just noticing right now that your name says Tardy.
Yeah. I couldn't think of anything better, and
that was pretty good.
Sorry.
I don't know why I just noticed that. Anyway, okay, going on to the 5th. This one for me was like, there's like 4 people that could easily slot in this one. But I have to go with, and it'll be for one reason, and I'll explain it in just a second. I'm going to say the 5th highest is going to be Arturi Lehkonen.
Yeah, I was wondering that. I struggled with it.
The only reason why is, yes, Middlestat will have a good chunk of points, and I 100% believe that with you, and I hope it's right.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think Arturi Lehkonen, I guess I shouldn't say the only thing, but the bulk of the reason that he's going to have so many points, well, assists, they come naturally. He's got field vision that is just phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
But as far as goals, he is like Mr. Cleanup duty, right? Yeah. Any juicy rebound, Lehkonen is there.
It'll be interesting to see how everybody's goal totals add up now that we don't have what's his face stealing them all.
Oh, Cogliano,
yeah. See, and
that's right.
I've gone back and forth with Lehkonen. I would be able to make a Captain, sorry, my dogs are. I told you at the end of the podcast, every time my dogs start getting antsy, every single time.
The biological clock, man.
With his, so they didn't like really update too much with Lehkonen. It's not, literally, they're gonna bring me the food bowl, Nick. Bringing me the food bowl. So he had that shoulder surgery, and it is going well, but they haven't specified when he'll be back. But it seems pretty apparent that he's not going to be back at the beginning of the year. I would imagine as long as he misses less than 10 games, he should still be up there because he generally has about one nearly catastrophic injury a year that seems to, I mean,
you know, like he almost shattered his skull last season.
Yeah. But he never seems to fall off or really struggle to recover from that. So, I mean, I would hope that we might even see an even better Cogliano if he's been playing with something that he was struggling with for a while. So, and that's...
You mean Lehkonen?
We had a lot of cleanup done on the guys' bodies this summer that I'm hoping we see some really rejuvenated people. Like Logan O'Connor.
I'm excited to see if Logan O'Connor has 2 Iron Man legs.
Yeah, but the thing is those hip surgeries, like, they're not a lingering thing that hurts or you have to dip your toe in. Like, I would imagine he'll come back as good as he's ever been.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Faster. I don't know how you can get faster with him, but faster.
Me, but
I'm just ready for Logan O'Connor back on that penalty kill, man. Like, there was just something just absolutely beautiful, like poetic almost, with him on that penalty kill.
I was listening to something today, and it was like a line discussion. Hypothetically, with Nichushkin back and Gabe back, the Roaring 20s line may be just our 4th line. Can you imagine being any other team's 4th line? What an absolutely disgusting thought. I would be mortified if I were any other team. Like, because they're not 4th line players, but if they're 4th in line, then
they're your band of misfits,
they would terrorize this season.
They would 100% do that. So yeah, that's my 5. I think as far as point scores, so I had McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, and then what did I say? Drouin and Lehkonen. But I could easily see Middlestat taking that.
Kovalenko coming out and just popping off.
That'd be fun. I'd welcome that with open arms. So, but yeah, those are my 5. And then Brit, you said McKinnon, a mix between Rantanen and Drouin, Middlestat, and Makar for number 5. So yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty of having this type of a problem where you have a whole bunch of depth where there's plenty of scoring to go around. It's all just a matter of who gets what and when, right?
Well, and this year is like such a beautiful opportunity that, unlike the year after the Stanley Cup year where we had a decimated roster and we would bring guys up and they would fail because everybody's mad and everybody else sucks and they're surrounded by AHL guys too. And honestly, it really stunted a lot of careers in the NHL for our prospects. Yeah. But this year, it'll be so nice that we'll be able to like utilize those guys, but gently have a, you know, a better introduction. Cause, is that when we brought Foodie in for like two games or whatever?
Something like that. He had a goal, and maybe even a couple, but I think a goal like, at least.
I can't even think of names. And Sampo Ranta is always going to be my biggest area of disgust with them because it's not fair. But I mean, he got in there and we were playing terrible and our lines were insane. And now he's probably not coming back again. Like, you know what I'm saying? Once you're off the list of Bednar's guys, then
you don't get back
this
on.
year hopefully we can get this is kind of earn a spot, and there is an actual chance for these guys to earn spots, but it's not going to be easy. But that's how you figure out who the true ones are that are ready to move up.
I agree. You know, it's Bednar has a very interesting way of liking somebody, but also a very interesting way of not liking somebody. It's
weird. His guys, man. And the formula is always, he's always talking about guys checking. I mean, you'd think that it would be all like hardworking dudes, but it's not. I don't know. It's just weird.
Yep, it is.
I'll call him and get him on here and we can ask him about it.
There you go. We'll get him on here. You do that. You have the connections, man. I'm just kind of along for the ride.
Well,
good deal.
Call him.
There you go. You got him on speed dial. Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it. I think for this episode, Britt. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add.
No, sorry about my once again shortfall when it comes to.
No, you're good. You're good.
It was great being your guest today, though.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. You're the one who brings all the insight. I'm just the guy that just goes, I didn't think of that, didn't think of that, you know.
No.
Yep. The knowledgeable one. Everyone loves the knowledgeable one.
No,
I'm just the guy that says where he can find us. Speaking of,
where can we find us?
You can always find Nik here
on time and in his seat with good lighting. I might be within.
I think your lighting looks great. I think your lighting looks really good. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow the MHRT network so you can get notified when shows like the Cluster Puck podcast go live. You can follow them on the various social media platforms of your choosing. And if you want to follow us, well, Britt and then kind of me to the side, you can follow us at Clusterpuck Avs on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, and at the Clusterpuck Podcast on Facebook. With that being said, I think we're inching to 4 weeks till the report to training camp? Is that about the right time?
Preseason it's getting there. I mean, it's like this week is ramped up with news and just stuff. So it's gonna come quick if people keep going all.
I know. I'm literally this close to making a paper chain to the start of the season. Even preseason. This close. Like I can taste it, you know, but maybe I do end up doing it. But yeah, we're inching that much closer. So we're just going to keep on keeping on. We're going to revamp our kind of preseason talks and season outlooks and stuff like that in the coming weeks. So that'll be really fun to do. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. We hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the night and a great weekend. And as always, go Avs, go. Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simpo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my life.